Alright, so this is a video I've been wanting to do for a while. I've been wanting to start a Total War Warhammer modded playthrough. I love the mods for Total War Warhammer 3. I love the modding community. They do great stuff. They handle a lot of the corners of the Warhammer universe that are outside the scope of Creative Assembly, outside of their own design philosophy. And whenever I play Total War Warhammer, it is pretty well always with mods. I've made a few recordings now playing vanilla, and vanilla is fine, but it just does not have a lot of the same magic and a lot of the fully fleshed out world you can make by putting together a collection of mods. And I want to start with a modded race. Like, this is part of what's really impressive to me about the Total Warhammer modding community. I'm slurring my words a little bit here. Is their capability to make these entirely new playable races that play so fundamentally differently from everybody else at the board. And Cataph Southern Realms / Cataph's TEB is one of the big ones. It is a modded race that I've already played through and beaten a campaign with before. I have played through and beaten the Estalia campaign with Lupio Sunscryer here in all his egotistical glory. I've always wanted to play the Border Princes, but I wanted to hold off on playing them until after I'd played already Estalia or Tylea, as I want to experience the campaign from an easier perspective, which Estalia and Tylea get geographical defense that Border Princes don't. You know, there's quite a bit of mountains and seas surrounding Estalia and Tylea that keep it safe, whilst the Border Princes, you're exposed to pretty well the entirety of the Badlands and the Empire for so much of your land. But I also want to play the Border Princes at some point, as the Border Princes interest me, both from a lore perspective and from the roster that Cataph built for it. As there are actually, within the Southern Realms, there are actually 4 different army lists. There are the Border Princes, Estalia, Tylea, and the New World Colonies. And the 8 playable factions of the Southern Realms, there are 2 that get access. For each army list within the Southern Realms, there are 2 factions that get it. The Border Princes army list really interested me. I wanted to hit it. Now, there are a wide variety of other mods going on here. It's a list of, I believe, a little over 90 mods. As you can probably tell by the fact that the campaign is listed as Immortal Empires Expanded, courtesy of Chaos Roby. If people want it, I would happily put together a collection of the mods that I am using. At the moment, I wanted to just go ahead and get a start on these recordings and not put them off. But if people want it, I will definitely put it up. I will try to shout out the mods as I see them. Now, the Border Princes, when we look at them here, let's see, the little bit of lore here. Volmir Gausor is a promising ruler in the Border Princes, one who may finally unite the lands at peace with the many nosy neighbors. Volmir Gausor, I believe, was not a character on the tabletop in lore. The name Volmir Gausor was created by Creative Assembly to be the name of the generic Empire General who leads the faction in the vanilla game. Cataph came along later and made a proper fleshed out character for Gausor. I believe the same thing was done for Lupio Sunscryer and Leonardo Catrazza. Now, when we look at Volmir Gausor's faction effects and lord effects, the first faction effect is Hardened Veterans, which is the same faction effect that all the other Southern Realms factions get. It's part of what makes them special. Hardened Veterans is plus for units that reach skill rank or veterancy rank 7 or above. You get plus 5 armor, not too shabby, plus 8% damage, that's quite good, and most importantly, strong vigor. Vigor is a mechanic that a lot of people tend to ignore. They don't see they don't see it as particularly strong, and in fact there tends to be a lot of mods that add perfect vigor pretty whimsically. And by now even Creative Assembly has a tendency to add perfect vigor pretty whimsically. The landmark that the Tomb Kings can build in the Desert of Araby is absurd, because it gives perfect vigor to the Ushabti. And it's incredible because strong vigor means it takes your units a much longer amount of time to get tired or exhausted. And perfect vigor means you never get tired or exhausted. And getting tired and getting exhausted cause massive stat debuffs that can make an elite unit effectively fight like a crappy, cheap chaff unit. And a cheap chaff unit becomes practically nothing. This means that the Southern Realms units may not on the surface seem like the best of the very best. They're definitely very good. They're probably the best human infantry in the Warhammer world. Kislev and Cathay are about competitive. But Southern Realms, their units will punch above their level so often because they just have good fundamentals like strong vigor. And that's part of what makes them interesting. The rest of these effects are unique to the Border Princes, and more specifically Valmir Gausser. The recruitment and upkeep cost for the 2 Myrmidian religious units are plus 50%, so you're generally not going to be recruiting them. Sisters of Fury are a very good unit, so if I get the opportunity, I'll certainly take them. Minus 10% construction cost for all buildings. Not exciting, but definitely good. Saves me quite a bit of cash. Leadership plus 5, that's an ambiguous effect. I'm going to assume it means plus 5 leadership for all units and all armies, which if that's the case is excellent. If it is not the case, well, I'm not sure what it does then. He also gets access, Gausser does, to Dwarf Rangers. The rest of the Southern Realms factions do not get access to Dwarf Rangers. Only Gausser does. That's quite neat. His Lord effects, plus 15% allegiance points gained for alliances with dwarfs. Again, more dwarf units, though those have to be purchased with allegiance instead of money, like with the Dwarf Rangers. And plus 10% casualty replenishment rate, which is not too terribly exciting, but it is very, very, very good. Like, ordinarily, when you get upgrades in terms of casualty replenishment rate, you're getting plus 3 or plus 4% casualty replenishment rate, not plus 10%. That means Gausser can afford losses a lot easier than a lot of other legendary lords. And long campaigns are not so much of a problem for him. Or long fights. He doesn't have to sit in the cut and heal for as long as most other legendary lords. So, let's go ahead and hit the Start Campaign button. The loading screen is going to take a little while. Like I said, there's somewhere above 90 mods, and every mod you have is going to inevitably cause the loading time to go up by just a little bit. Though, of course, each individual mod is going to have, like, virtually no noticeable impact. It's just going to be a build-up of, 90 mods. It's quite a bit. Now, the nice thing here is, though, Valmir Gausser gets a unique loading screen little lore blurb. Although the dwellers of the borderlands wouldn't care to admit it, the humans of this country are like a large, robust creeper. Centuries ago, human colonists and refugees started to build a new nation on the borders of the old world. Anyone else would have been strangled between mountains and sea, between dwarfs and greenskins. Today, one of the many self-defined princes of these lands may have the potential to unite the many squabbling towns and clear out the many threats. Valmir Gausser distinguished himself as a solid warrior and commander in Araby, and can claim to have friends of both Bretonnia and dwarfdom. So, the Border Prince's lore, I'll probably talk about it quite a bit throughout the rest of these videos. But I do find that really interesting, the colonists and refugees part. That the Border Princes is kind of a mishmash of the cast-downs, the hand-me-downs, of the rest of the nations of the old world, and even to a certain degree, Araby. And I find the cultural roots of the Border Princes pretty interesting. The Border Princes were in many places made as a nation on the Warhammer world that was deliberately designed to not have lore, really. They were made as the, fill in the space with whoever you need for your tabletop campaign sort of faction. But what lore there is for them, I do really like. Alright, here we go. So, we start out in ownership of Achendorf and Matorka. I did actually, this is the second time I'm attempting to record this video, so I'm already a little bit aware of what is going on here. Let's go ahead and join our first hero, Emilia Emilshilder, to Valmir's army. So, our starting army, camping out in Karakangazar, our starting enemy, is the Disciples of the Maw under Scrag the Slaughterer. Your first enemy being a legendary lord means that it's not going to be an easy first fight. You're going to have to probably play it yourself. But our starting army is not too shabby. Gausser is not he's a solid legendary lord. He's a solid legendary lord, or apparently a legendary border prince. Solid melee stats, and he has the Killing Blow ability, which is plus 25% damage. Quite nice. Amelia Shielder will get better as we put more levels into her. She doesn't have any prayers to start with, however, so for now she's just going to be anti-large, which against ogres is far from bad. Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. A fun unit that's nice for going against more heavily armored enemies, though the ogres aren't too heavy on armor, so he's not going to be too immediately useful. Pikemen. Loads of anti-large damage. Charge defense against all units. Charge reflect. And as long as they're above 50% health, and they are currently winning winning the combat they are in, they have plus 20% melee attack, which takes them up above 30, yeah, into kind of the low to mid 30 range, which is very good for what is supposed to be a defensive anti-large unit. And 40 melee defense is not too shabby either. Bugman's Rangers, they are modified by a mod I have. I have the Lost and Found Dwarf Collection, I believe is the name. And the Lost and Found Collection comes with a variety of changes for the dwarfs as a whole, and one of them is giving Rangers, Dwarf Rangers, firewall moving and 360-degree firing. I'm not a super huge fan of this choice. It makes the Dwarf Rangers play a little bit too similar to the Ranger units that so many other races get. But I love virtually everything else that the mod came with, so I just kind of lump it and deal with it. The Freelance Knights, solid cavalry unit. Pretty well Knights Errant from Bretonnia, or excuse me, not Knights Errant, excuse me. Knights of the Realm from Bretonnia, though slightly inferior, but still a very good cavalry unit. Light Scouts, a kind of like Mounted Yeoman, but instead of just kind of being only having Vanguard deploy, and that's really all there is to the unit, they do have Devastating Flanker. I doubt I'll get to use it here, however, as Scrag's units outnumber me. I'm not really going to get to flank very much. I also have a Great Cannon. What can the Great Cannon be upgraded? This is a little bit odd. Why would the Great Cannon be upgradable? I'm going to wager that the Bugman Rangers... Oh, they can't be upgraded. But the Great Cannon can be upgraded with, yeah, this stuff, which I am going to bet comes from the Grudgebringer mod, from the Old versus New Lost Factions team. Which is also an excellent mod that I want to play on recording at some point. Okay, enough flapping my jaws. Let's go ahead and go after Scrag. Now, this is going to be a Pyrrhic victory on auto-resolve. I'm going to go ahead and quick save just in case. So, the army here... Scrag is a fairly big threat. The Gorgers are fairly big threats. However, with this army, generally the big threat is they outnumber me by quite a bit. I've only got 3 frontlines units. They have pretty well their entire army, barring the trappers, are frontline units. So I will be swarmed very easily. I want to work around that. And their units are generally very fast, which somewhat invalidates the speed advantage I have. Yeah, Gorgers have 54 speed. Bulls have 54 speed. Whereas my cavalry is fast. They're faster, but they're not quite fast enough to easily escape. So this is kind of a rough starting army. We've got cannons here, and we've got the Priestess of Mermidia. We've got the pikemen. These are all excellent anti-ogre units. But... it's not an ideal situation. We are outnumbered, and they are faster than us. So we have to play around the board. Now, the map is, yeah, forested map, where we can take advantage of the hills. Now, fighting in the forest would be to our advantage. We don't have very many large units, whereas they are pretty well all large units. They do have Noblars, which are infantry-sized, but they're a joke. So fighting in the forest would be a good idea, and fighting from the hilltop, where we get the advantage of height, would be a good idea as well. Now, the way we may want to play this, we want to try and cover flanks if we can help it, however. And that is one issue with this situation, is the possibility of getting flanked. So I'm almost kind of thinking that deploying here closer to these cliffs might be a wise idea. However, that would kind of deny us the cannons, because the cannon needs a straight shot. So I won't do that. I need the cannon. I'll probably play it like I did on the recording that wound up getting cut due to technical difficulties. So I will deploy on a hilltop in the forest, using the cannon to shoot down Scrag the Slaughterer, and the pikemen and the dwarf warriors with great weapons kind of arrayed around them. Now, what I will do to defend the cannon, that is a good question. A big part of the question here is just how much capability they have to flank here, because they have the Gorgers and they have the Saber-Tusks. So, let's see. My current plan, let's see, this hill will be where we fight. We'll put the cannons on top of it so they can get a good shot down at the fools below. And then we will put the pikemen arrayed in front of it. We want them to maintain more of a formation with some depth to it. And that is because we do not want the Ogre Bulls to bowl right through them into my cannon. However, on some level, I will not get a say in the matter. I am just simply too outnumbered to form a real front line to defend my cannon. I'll use the Priestess of Myrmidia to kind of cover the gap here. Gausser, I'll put right here. The Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, I will put kind of in the back line here. I think it's somewhat of an inevitability that my cannons will get hit. However, I can mitigate this not only by putting the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons behind the cannons, but also by putting the Bugman Rangers inside the cannon crew. So at the very least, they'll take some of the brunt of an attack. Now, what I'm going to do here is, let's see, with my cavalry, I'm going to want to take advantage of the possibility of flanking. So I'm going to put the light scouts here in this bit of forest. I'm going to put the knights, the freelance knights, right, let's see, here seems good. And I'm going to put the freelance knights into lance formation. I know a lot of people hate lance formation, but it's always done well for me, so either everybody else is using it wrong, or I'm observing a small pool of RNG that has just happened to work out in my favor almost all the time. Now let's take a quick look at the units. Now I do have the better camera mod, so I can actually put the camera somewhat close to the ground. It's a nice necessity. Now when you look at the Southern Realms units, the Border Princes in particular, Cataph had an eye for design. And the Tylian and Estalian units were very much designed to have the kind of Italian or Spanish Renaissance look to them. The Border Princes are designed to look like a mixture, a confusing mixture of Tylia, Estalia, the Empire, and even some stuff they got from the Dwarfs or Kislev. So you can kind of see that with what's going on here. Some of the different helmets they've got here that they don't really match. The pikemen are a nice quality mercenary unit, but at the end of the day, the Border Princes, you know, the real quality mercenaries go to Tylia or Estalia or the Empire. They don't go to the Border Princes. The Priestess of Myrmidia here has a nice look. She's got a little bit of a Captain America or the Flash wings on the head here. This nice spear with the banner coming down. And I think that's a High Elf asset. I'm not for certain. Little bit of a kind of going for like a Spartan, kind of a hoplite, Greek hoplite, hoplite, whatever you want to call them, sort of deal here, which is part of the Myrmidia aesthetic. Gausser, we've already got a good look at him, but he's got that cool blue scarf, which I believe was the... I believe the lore for the blue scarf is that he took that from Araby. Typical Imperial cannons, typical dwarfs, those don't look any different from usual. The Freelance Knights look broadly, if memory serves, yeah, they look broadly like their Bretonnian equivalents, though several of them are sleeveless or have short sleeves. Just to remind you, these aren't quite real Bretonnian Knights. These are the descendants of Bretonnian Knights who, practically, I think about a millennia ago, did push the orcs and goblins out of the Border Princes and settled here and became pretty well the first Border Princes. They're still, you know, descendants of Bretonnian noble lineage, and they still view themselves as part of the Bretonnian tradition, but they're not exactly up to snuff with the quote-unquote true, real Bretonnians. And let's see, the Light Scouts over here, yes, I know this may not be the most exciting content for me to look at cool units, but deal with it. I always liked this guy, these two guys right here. These gentlemen with the mustaches and the beards and the funny hats and the capes. The Light Scout is not a terribly impressive unit. It can do very well relative to its cost because it has Devastating Flanker, and because it has Vanguard Deploy, and it's got really high speed. But I partly just like the Light Scouts as a unit. And I've always liked... They're one of the units I love to look at in custom battles because I just like to look at my toys because I'm a man-child. The Light Scouts have this whole... the intended effect, I believe, was to try and make them look like kind of medieval Greek farmers. And that is definitely the feeling that I get from these guys. And the rest of the unit is a bit more Imperial looking, which it's the Border Princes. It's, you know, a mixed heritage. But either which way, after all that, now let's actually start the battle. Okay, the cannon, we are going to go ahead and pause and have the cannon aim for Scrag. We want Scrag to go early on. Now let's make sure that they don't shoot my own men. The closer the ogres get to my line, the more of a worry that's going to be. Well, that's awfully nice of Scrag to stand in front of the Noblars so that any shots that miss him hit the Noblars. Not that I'm too excited about wasting shots on Noblars, but whatever. Alright, the Saber Tusks and the Gorgers are going to be the big problem here. Luckily, it looks like the Saber Tusks are making the stupid decision to go ahead of the rest of the army. Let's see, let's put the units slightly offset diagonally here so that they can't just be flanked from the side too hard. Taking some shots, some decent shots, and old Scrag. And the gap we've got between our pikemen here means we shouldn't be shooting at our own men too hard. Now, what are the Rangers going to shoot at? The Saber Tusks, I don't mind that. Let's have the Light Scouts step up here. No, let's hold them back. Let's see, let's pause and get a good look for what's going on here. I am being approached a little bit on the flank by these bulls, but they're evidently not going to flank. The AI sometimes doesn't understand how to flank forces, especially forces that are deployed at slightly odd angles. So, let's see. If we want to use the Light Scouts are a weak unit that really benefit from having a numbers advantage, so that the enemy does not get to choose their matchups, and you can flank as you see fit. So, we're going to have to just use them at some point. The Freelance Knights, I want to use them earlier in the battle so that there's not too much pressure on my infantry or my missiles or my artillery. We're going to have Gausser get in here and fight the Ogre Bulls with dual weapons. He is one of the stronger units in this army, so I'll make good use of him. Now, the Saber Tusks are going to lose to these pikemen pretty cleanly. Though, part of the Saber Tusks have gone around to attack the cannons instead, which is going to be a problem. Okay, let's get our Priestess of Myrmidia in there. The cannons are going to end up ultimately doing nothing. We'll turn off fire at will just so they don't do friendly fire. The cannons are likely just going to die here. But that is... I kind of knew that was going to happen. It was an inevitable sort of deal here. Let's pull the Freelance Knights out if we can. They are dug in pretty deep, so they're going to be hard to pull out. Let's see, the Light Scouts, the Noblars are pursuing. Let's send the Light Scouts after the Saber Tusks. I'd prefer not have to deal with them if I can. Let's get the Freelance Knights a little bit away. Now, let's go ahead and cast Killing Blow on old Gausser. Now, let's use the Freelance Knights on those Noblar Trappers, sure. The Light Scouts, are they going to eventually catch the Saber Tusks? They are. Let's see, the Freelance Knights are going to absolutely just mulch through the Noblar Trappers, and it's going to be a disgusting one-sided battle. Let's see over here, these pikemen are being used... Hang on, let's get the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons in here. And let's get them... Where do we want to use them? The Gorgers are probably going to annihilate a lot of my Rangers, but it'll give me the time to bring the Great Weapon Warriors. Let's get rid of this unit of Gorgers here. A lot of Noblar spam here. It looks like we've mostly dealt with the major units. My pikemen just liquidated. Liquidated? No. Well, maybe. Liquefied. There we go. Liquefied the actual selection of true Ogre units. Don't have to worry about those Saber Tusks. And yeah, we've actually done really well. We didn't even lose that many cannons, even though the Gorgers hit them. Yeah, this was quite nice. Alright, we're going to want to run down who we can and on the field, but I'm not that worried. Let's see. The Knights, the Freelance Knights, and the Light Scouts are going to do the majority of running enemies down. The cannons, let's have the cannons, yeah. Turn back on fire at will. And let's get the pikemen and this other infantry out of the way here so they don't take many cannon shots. Let's not have the Freelance Knights run into the way of the cannon shots. Let us see here. Is there anyone else to pursue? Does not really seem to be the case. Let's turn off fire at will on the cannon then. We'll hit backspace so he doesn't take any orders and doesn't hit the Freelance Knights. The Freelance Knights are a quite good unit, and I would prefer not to see them take much damage. I'm glad that I was able to get use out of the Light Scouts here. On my previous attempt at recording this, I wound up misusing the Light Scouts, and they just got absolutely violated by several Ogre units. I also wound up misusing the Bugman's Rangers. It was quite embarrassing, let me tell you. The Freelance Knights took more damage than I wanted, but realistically, I think things worked out pretty well here. The Pikemen took a lot of damage, but the Pikemen fought a lot of units there. And they did very well because the Pikemen are an exceptional unit. Sadly, as the Border Princes, you don't get access to the standard Pikemen. These two that I start with of Svalmir Gausser are going to be the only two that I get. Pikemen are otherwise a luxury afforded to the other Southern Realms factions, but we as the Border Princes generally have a less quality infantry selection until we get to the late game. Let's go ahead and wrap this battle up. I'm not that worried about killing more Noblar trappers. Close victory is better than Pyrrhic victory. Okay, yeah, that army is going down. That one unit of Ogre Bulls that survived with a decent amount of health is not going to keep the army around. Very good amount of kills on the Freelance Knights, and even better XP on the Pikemen. We're going to want to build up a lot of XP on our units, because once the units get to a very high experience level, they are just going to be positively exceptional. Pikemen in particular are a unit that can get disgustingly strong once you've got good Lord buffs, technology buffs, and veterancy on them. And nice little quote here from the Gotrek and Felix books. I believe that is Troll Slayer. One of the only 3 Gotrek and Felix books I have read. I have read the first 3. Troll Slayer, Skaven Slayer, I think? Or is it Rat Slayer? I think it's Skaven Slayer, Troll Slayer, Skaven Slayer, and then Demon Slayer, I believe, are the first 3 Gotrek and Felix books. I did get one of those anthologies. A physical edition, too, which is pretty nice. I'd love to get physical editions of more Warhammer Fantasy books, but sadly they're just not being printed, so I'll just have to settle for digital editions. Not a big fan of ebooks, but it's the world we live in. Okay, let's see here. We got 3 options for the end of the battle. We can pardon them for 605 gold. We can replenish our army by 19%. That's pretty good. Or we can get increased leadership and upkeep. I'll take the replenishment. The replenishment sounds very good, so we can push on ahead into Katakangazar. Now, it's good that we got Scrag dealt with. I forgot to mention this. This was more of a worry for me early on. Oh, hey, increased winds of magic from killing Scrag. So, because we got rid of Scrag, we don't have to worry about the 2 legendary heroes that Scrag gets from the Legendary Characters mod. The Legendary Characters mod. We do not have to worry about Horg Frostmaw or Brog Slavelord. And that, I'm glad about that, because the legendary characters, some of the legendary characters are pretty strong. Okay, we've got a level for each for Valmir Gausser and for Amelia Immelschilder. Now, the first point, as always, goes into Route Marcher. It's hard to turn down campaign movement range. While for Amelia Immelschilder, let's see, training is so good on Southern Realms, so I'm taking that. Okay, now we push on to Katakangazar, and we're going to auto-resolve this. And thank God for it, because they actually have quite the numbers advantage there in terms of having quite a large front line. That would have been a pain to deal with. We'd have been getting flanked all over the place. And we will go ahead and occupy. And Valmir Gausser got his first mount. He got a horse. And we completed our first mission. We got 750 gold and the Iron Curse icon. And we secured the Eastern Border Princes. And we wiped out the Disciples of the Maw. And we got the Ruby Ring of Ruin. Ruby Ring of Ruin. Not too shabby. If we capture 2 provinces, we get 1,000 gold. Not too shabby. Now, we did start with 2 little regions to begin with. We started with possession of Akendorf and Matorka, and with Katakangazar here, we now dominate the eastern border princes. Now, let's see, before anything, I want to go ahead and put in these skill points. Now, let us see here. If memory serves, the blue line is quite good for the Southern Realms. Growth, I remember, is quite important, but we're probably going to want to go into the red line first just to make sure I can get the most... Ooh, unit experience gain per turn plus 75. That's nice. I'll take that. The red line is always good. Get more value out of the units that you have. Make up for the fact that the AI usually gets a fair amount of cheats. Now, let's see here. There are 6 different trees you can invest in, and they are specifically made sure to be somewhat ambiguous, if memory serves. Perhaps so that you can get better usage out of units recruited from allied recruitment? I do not remember for certain. Let us see. Speed for all units is very good, but if memory serves, the first 2 to really go for are the melee chapters 1 and 2. Well, this is straightforward enough. Oh, wait, there's another chapter. So, Melee Chapter 1 offers increased melee attack for hand weapon and dual-wielding units, and increased melee defense for spear, pike, halberd, lance, and great weapon units. So that's going to be increased melee defense on pikemen and the cavalry, which is not too shabby. But we're playing Southern Realms. We're probably going to want... we're playing Border Princes. We're not going to get access to that many pikemen. What pikemen we do get access to are the half-pikes, which are not too impressive stat-wise. So we're probably going to want to invest in getting more melee attack for cavalry first, as the Border Princes has better cavalry anyways. I'd like to get more offensive value out of the freelance knights I already have. Okay, that's what I was wondering. I thought that it locks the melee chapter 1 if you go for this. Okay. So, solid choice, really. Doesn't make a big difference. While Amelia Immelschilder can go ahead and invest in, let's see, we're not worrying about corruption right now. Don't have any buildings I want damaged. Don't have any heroes I want wounded. We're going to take Safeguard. Plus 6 armor. Not too shabby. Up past 90 armor, so she will be resisting anywhere from 45 to 90% of incoming base damage. Okay, we're going to want to also make sure to recruit here. Now, with the buildings we have, let's see. By default, the settlement capital of Border Prince settlements gives access to militia spearmen and militia archers, and then at tier 2 it gives access to half-pikes. We also have in Akendorf the unique building de Valmer Gausser, the Rangers Camp, which gives us early access to border rangers and light scouts. So we are going to want to go ahead and, let's see, we do need a bit more of a front line. I would like a cheap front line, because right now we've got a lot of missiles and cavalry. But border rangers are also very tempting. Border rangers are fairly solid skirmishers. They do decent damage, they have decent range, they have firewall moving, they have, importantly, they have, let me pin this, let me see, that's right, they have Strider. I forgot they had Strider. That's a very good ability to have on a skirmisher. That's an excellent ability to have on a skirmisher. And 33 speed, not too shabby. So they can happily skirmish up and down hills and through forests without any issue. Very nice. For now, we just need a cheap, plentiful front line, so I'll take militia spearmen. Now, for the investment of the rest of our money into building up the actual economy, I will go for, let's see, we've got 2 empty building slots. In Karakangazar, we have gotten, let's see, the grazing pastures, minus 10 upkeep for all cavalry in the province, excellent, which goes up to minus 20%. And this is actually where I should probably talk about what a big part of what sets the Southern Realms apart. The Southern Realms can superficially look like the Empire, but they're in fact very different. Because you'll notice virtually every building they have goes up to tier 5. These buildings at tier 4 and tier 5 can get fairly expensive, but they generate massive amounts of money and growth. Like this building right here. Income from ports, plus 25%. That is amazing. And the Southern Realms already make quite a bit of money off of ports. Let's see. Yeah, 800 gold from ports. That's comparable to what Norska makes from ports. And Norska makes a lot of money from ports. Plus 25% to 800 gold? Especially if you're in a province that has a lot of ports, that is a lot of money. Plus 5% tradable resources produced faction-wide. Also excellent. You'll be making so much money off of trade agreements. Plus 10% income from trade tariffs. That's more money the more trade agreements you have. Like, they're very good. Like, right here, just 750 gold for a single building slot. And that's only 2,700 gold. Once you get a settlement up to tier 5 of the Southern Realms, it'll be making a lot of money. But you gotta spend money to make money. And when we get into the plutocracy mechanic in particular, we'll be seeing that in effect. The Southern Realms is really... It's really like... Alongside the Wood Elves and the Warriors of Chaos, I think of the Southern Realms as one of the few distinctively tall-focused factions in Total War Warhammer. They don't want to build wide. They don't want to just eat up loads of land. They can try and do that, and they won't be awful at it. But really what you want to do as the Southern Realms is you want to pick a few settlements, a few provinces that you want to be your breadbasket, your money basket, and you want to then send your armies outwards into the rest of the world, sacking and looting and raising to making money, or capturing settlements and then selling them to the highest bidder. And that is very loreful for the Southern Realms, and I think that's very, very cool. So, all that out of the way, let's go ahead and look. What do we want our first building here in Auchendorf to be? Karakan Khazaria, let's just go with right now. The grazing pastures, they give money, they give casualty replenishment rate, they give growth, they give reduced upkeep for cavalry, and it's only 450 gold. That is an excellent building. I'm definitely taking that. However, we're going to also want to invest here. Let's see. I would like some cool military units. However, money is quite nice. And 250 gold for a tier 1 building is not too shabby. Tier 2, you're already up to 370. But here's another nice thing about the Southern Realms. They can get their garrison buildings up to tier 5, the Star Fort, which provides not only better towers, but plus 8 leadership when under siege, plus 8 melee defense when under siege. Both excellent. They get a ability in the siege where you can call down pretty well wind spells. Yeah, it's even called a wind spell. And an excellent garrison. So the Southern Realms get to not only wage war across the world, but their quality garrisons mean that your armies don't need to be sitting at home constantly babysitting your settlements from the, 5 armies that are using force march to stay out of your reach while staying in the proximity of your cities. No, your cities, as the Southern Realms, can mostly be self-sufficient. They just need you to continually pump money into them. So you send your armies around the world adventuring to gather money to pump money back into them. Though, of course, it's not like the Changeling where the game's impossible to lose. No, you can still lose your cities. You can still make the wrong people mad. But it's a very different, very fun experience. So we're going to be working towards that. That's why I've already started a garrison in Auchendorf, so I don't need to bother holding it. I will just push on with Gausser into the western border princes. And we also get a commandment. Let's see, what commandment do we want in the border princes? Levy conscripts. Allows us to recruit a mercenary captain even if we don't have a building for it. That's neat, but we won't be doing that just yet. Should we? I don't know, there might be a good reason for that. Casualty replenishment rate, not too shabby. Stimulate trade. This is the really good stuff. Plus 5% income from trade tariffs faction-wide. You will just, trade tariffs are ordinarily not, most factions won't make that much money off of trade tariffs. It's just a little, it's just a little nice thing. Let's go ahead and open the diplomacy menu and see if we can set up some trade deals. Who's willing to play ball with us? Gosh, Nagia? Oh, we already start with 2 trade deals. One with Berekvar and one with Thegan's Errantry. Very nice. Let's go ahead and look at that just real quick. So out the gate, we are making, from trade tariffs with Berekvar, only 60 gold. And from Thegan's Errantry, only 60 gold. It doesn't get to be much more than that, a relative pittance for most of the factions. But for the Southern Realms, you can, even if you're not developing that many trade goods, you can make absurd amounts of money just through using the commandments in some of your buildings to bump up the tariffs to absurd numbers and make loads of money. And plus 2% income from ports, that's just insane. That's, once you start to get really tall settlements, that starts to make playing wide as the Southern Realms a lot more viable, and specifically focusing on taking the coastal regions of the world so you can print loads of money from the ports. Collect tribute, plus 5% income from all buildings. That's your standard make more money edict. Foster independence. That's one thing I think is really cool about the Southern Realms, especially Tylea. Estalia and the Border Princes are a bit more tyrannical, but Tylea, is like, they have republics. They're merchant republics, granted, but still republics. And, like, libertine philosophies and theories of political philosophy and all that. It's a cool corner of the Warhammer world. It's unique. Increased public order, reduced corruption, increased chances of intercepting any underway using armies. Standard edict. Hold fairs, growth. Not too shabby. So I will probably, for now... I'm tempted to grab that early mercenary captain. I think I'll be grabbing that early mercenary captain, yeah. Now, for our first research, let's see. The Southern Realms does not have a whole lot of technologies. They're very good technologies, they just don't have a whole lot of them. But they are pretty good technologies that end in a very... There's just 3 little branches, each of which ends in a pretty exceptional technology. Now, let's see here. If memory serves, each of these 3, focus on... This one is focused on more so economic and diplomatic matters. This one is more so focused on strategy, it seems. And this one's more focused on having better units. And each of them ends in a unique tech to the Border Princes. If I was playing Estalia, they'd each end in a unique tech to Estalia. If I was playing Tylea, it'd end in a unique tech for Tylea. You get the idea. So, keeping that in mind, that we get very good stuff. Ooh, minus 10% upkeep for swashbucklers. Ooh. Yeah, keeping that in mind, we'll want to probably work towards each of these, as each of these are quite good. Minus 15% upkeep for all infantry. Wow, plus 2 recruit rank for all infantry. That's quite good. Okay, what tech am I going to want to go for first? Increased income from raiding, sacking, and increased casualty replenishment rate. Not too shabby. Let's see. Immune to psychology for all lords. Oh, that's good. Plus 5 leadership for all characters. That's both lords and heroes. That's, again, quite good. Increased melee defense for adventurers, carabiniers, and the Carlson militia. As well as the discombobulate ability. What does discombobulate do? It gets rid of anti-large and anti-infantry. Yeah, though, that's pretty solid, but it's going to be a ways before... I'm a ways off from getting Carlson militia. If I were playing Estalia or the New World Colonies, I think I'd be a bit more quick to rush this tech, because you're going to get adventurers a bit earlier with them. Recruit the veterans. Increased recruit rank just for all units. Increased melee attack and both melee and missile damage for Kranakanyes. Not too shabby. The plus 2 recruit rank is most of what I'd be going for, though. Expeditionary veterans. This is one of the really nice techs. Plus 1 leadership per experience rank or veterancy rank for all units. Units already get plus 1 leadership per veterancy rank. This is basically doubling it. So this means that, let's say, I'm just going to sit here and dive into what makes this mod cool, deal with it. The pikemen here have already got, let's see, what is it? They're rank 2, so they've got plus 2 leadership. They started off with 69 leadership. Keep laughing. So, from there, under standard veterancy, they would go up to, what, 78? But, once I get that tech, they'll instead go up to 87. And there will be, of course, the various lord buffs and other tech buffs I can get. taking it where pikemen are borderline unbreakable, which is something ordinarily for the dwarfs you get. So that's very nice. And if memory serves, there's a couple techs that do things like that, a couple lord abilities. But let's go through here and look. Local steel. +2 armor-piercing damage for all units, that's quite nice. +10 armor for all units that are already wearing heavy armor. Not too shabby either. Though I'm not using a whole lot of those right now. +10% campaign movement range, +5 leadership when attacking. That's very good. +10 charge bonus for cavalry units. Okay, that's excellent. -10% vigor loss reduction. Very nice. And +8% speed for all units. Very good stuff. These are very good techs. +3 Lord Recruit rank. Hard to turn that down. Now, if memory serves, these down here are quite solid. Yes, increased diplomatic relations with dwarfs, increased missile strength for pretty well all of my ranged units except for bows, and reduced recruitment cost for heavy armor units. Not too shabby. Ah, yes, this tech. I remember this tech being quite the winner. +10% income from trade tariffs, +10 growth. That's very important, so other realms can kind of suffer for growth sometimes. At least from my memories playing Estalia. +5% tradable resources produced, +10% income from ports, and +4 melee attack for duelists and Montante swordsmen, really. Though apparently the Border Princes do not get access to the Montante swordsmen, which I believe makes them the only Southern Realms faction that doesn't. Still, duelists are pretty far from bad. Increased diplomatic relations with all factions, reduced hero action cost, increased hero action success chance. And over here, control, higher control, lower corruption, and stronger Myrmidian units. And the importing the orders. Ah, importing the orders, right. This tech gets rid of the malice on the Myrmidian units. It pretty well gives us as much access to the Myrmidian units as the other Southern Realms. I forgot this tech existed. But nonetheless, it's quite good. You'll want to combo that with Greater Rights of Myrmidia to make them even better units. But right here, I am thinking classical military studies, which does lead to the Phalanxes tech, which I believe is it's Border Princes exclusive, because it's specifically a buff for a Border Princes exclusive unit. I'm thinking classical military studies. It's hard to turn down campaign movement range. It's hard to turn down increased leadership when attacking. So I'll go for that now, and then probably from there I'll finish out the rest of this tree and then take Unsung Heroes. -10% upkeep for light cavalry, border rangers, and swashbucklers is very nice, as well as the melee attack and melee defense buffs. The swashbucklers are one of the very strongest Southern Realms units, so I would not mind to have myself some. Okay, and after all of that endless chattering about the tech tree, I'm ready to actually end a turn. Unthinkable. Now, from our current position, we'll want to push into the Western Border Princes, which will be more fights with ogres, I believe. So, we'll want to probably get more and more anti-large. Now, are the militia spearmen anti-large? I can't remember. Typical practice is, of course, for spearmen to be anti-large in Total War. But militia spearmen were deliberately designed to be not too terribly impressive stats-wise. By the way, peep the 341 factions at the top of the map, at the top of the screen there. The Immortal Empire's Expanded mod showing itself off here. But it doesn't take too long. The turn takes about as long as to pass as it did in Warhammer 2, with Warhammer 2 being a much smaller game. Testament to how much better the turn passing process is in Warhammer 3. And the longer the game goes on, the more and more of these factions are going to get wiped out and lower the amount of time it takes to pass the turn. Okay, Black Venom Tribe has been annihilated, the bloody hands of Confederated Thief Snatches. And also the Eustachio Sunscryer quest. If we go to Magritta, we will start the quest to get the Eustachio Sunscryer Legendary Lord. I don't know if we'll ever get around to that. That's kind of uniquely Estalian to my mind. It's a little bit odd to have him running around in the Border Princes. So, we now have a mission to recruit 5 units. Not too shabby.
What does the Emperor bid?
Let's move our boys up. And I will probably actually go ahead and after this turn, before I wrap the turn, I am probably actually going to go ahead... Wait, are the Militia Spearmen anti-large? Yes, they are, but how good is the anti-large bonus? 15! Not too shabby! Alright, that can actually make the Militia Spearmen not an awful unit. So I'll grab some more. Gonna be going against the ogres, don't want to be flanked, and lots of anti-large will make up for the bad numbers of disadvantage. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cut this recording here. While I am definitely going to keep playing and keep recording in a separate recording, I need to go ahead and cut this recording, as I need to make an urgent trip to the bathroom. So, on that polite little high-class upper brow note, I will see you folks later.